Sarah's hands trembled as she held the hidden document that would destroy everything the HOA board thought they controlled, but when she discovered who was really behind the illegal constitution, her blood ran cold because the signature at the bottom belonged to someone she trusted with her life. Sarah Martinez stared at the certified letter in disbelief, her coffee growing cold on the granite countertop. The HOA fine was $2,847 for unauthorized landscaping modifications. 3 small lavender plants she'd added to her front garden bed. "This is insane," she muttered, scanning the legal jargon. Her husband David looked up from his laptop, his brow furrowed with concern. "What now?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. The Willowbrook Heights Homeowners Association had been escalating their harassment for months. They're claiming I violated Section 4.7b of the community Constitution, Sarah said, her voice rising. "David, we read every single page of those HOA documents before we bought this house. There was no Section 4.7b. David's fingers stopped typing. "That's impossible. Are you sure?" Sarah was already pulling out the thick folder of HOA documents they'd received at closing. She flipped through page after page, her heart pounding. "Look, Section 4.7 ends at subsection A. There is no B." The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. David slowly closed his laptop. "Sarah, if they're citing rules that don't exist in the official documents, then they're making them up as they go along." She grabbed her phone, hands shaking with anger. "I'm calling that witch Patricia Henley right now." Patricia Henley answered on the first ring, her voice syrupy, sweet. "Oh, Sarah dear, I was expecting your call. I assume you received our notice." "Patricia, I'm looking at our HOA Constitution right now, and there is no Section 4.7b. You're fining me for a rule that doesn't exist." A pause, then Patricia's laugh, cold and calculating. "Oh, my dear, you must have an outdated copy. The Constitution has been ... updated. Didn't you receive the new version?" Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. "When was it updated?" "We never received any notice of changes." "Well, that's not our responsibility if your mail gets lost. The current version clearly states that any landscaping modifications require board approval. The fine stands." The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone, fury building in her chest like a furnace. "She hung up on me," she whispered. David was already standing, his face dark with anger. "This is fraud, Sarah. They can't just create new rules without proper notice and voting procedures." That evening, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. At 3 a.m., she gave up and crept downstairs to her laptop. If the HOA had a new constitution, there had to be a record of it somewhere. She started with the County Records Office website. Nothing. The State Business Registry showed no amendments to the HOA's governing documents. Growing more suspicious, she dug deeper into public records. What she found made her blood freeze. The original HOA constitution filed with the county in 2018 was completely different from the one they'd received at closing. Not just different. The version they'd been given was missing entire sections about due process, voting procedures, and homeowner rights. Sarah's hands shook as she printed out the real constitution. According to the actual document, the HOA board couldn't impose fines without a formal hearing process. They couldn't create new rules without a 60-day notice period and a homeowner vote. Most shocking of all, the board was supposed to be elected annually, not the permanent positions Patricia and her cronies had held for 5 years. Her phone buzzed. A text from her neighbor, Miguel. "They got me too. $1,200 fine for my fence being non-compliant. This is getting out of hand." Sarah screenshot the message and immediately called Miguel. He answered on the second ring, sounding exhausted. "Miguel, when did you get your HOA documents?" "At closing, same as everyone." "Why? What's the date on your constitution?" Papers rustled in the background. "Says it was ratified in 2018, but amended in 2019. Wait, that's weird. My closing was in 2020. Sarah's pulse quickened. "Miguel, I found something. Can you come over first thing tomorrow morning and bring your HOA paperwork? All of it." The next morning, Miguel arrived with a stack of documents and a grim expression. They spread everything across Sarah's dining room table like detectives working a case. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to the authentic Constitution she'd printed. "This is what the county has on file. Now look at what they gave us." Miguel's eyes widened as he compared the documents. "These are completely different, Sarah. This is criminal. They gave us fake documents." "It gets worse," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I checked the signature page on the real Constitution. Guess who was one of the original signatories back in 2018? She pointed to a signature at the bottom of the authentic document. Miguel's face went white. "That's impossible," he breathed. "Tom Bradley wasn't even on the board in 2018. He told everyone he just joined last year." Sarah nodded grimly. "Tom Bradley has been lying to all of us. He was there from the beginning, and I think he's the one who's been orchestrating this whole fake Constitution scheme." Tom Bradley, the friendly neighbor, who'd welcomed them to the community with homemade cookies. The man who'd commiserated with them about Patricia's harsh rules and promised to look into the increasing fines. The supposed ally who'd been playing the role of concerned neighbor while secretly pulling the strings. "We need to confront him," Miguel said, his voice shaken with rage. "No," Sarah said quietly, her mind already working. "We need to be smarter than that. If Tom's been running this con for years, a direct confrontation will just make him cover his tracks better." She looked at Miguel with steely determination. "We're going to take down this entire operation. But first, we need to find out just how deep this corruption goes and how many people are in on it." Outside, a car door slammed. Through the window, Sarah saw Tom Bradley walking up her driveway, his usual friendly smile plastered across his face. But now she saw something else in his eyes, something cold and calculating that made her stomach turn. He knocked on the door, and Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized he might have been watching them all along. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she quickly swept the incriminating documents under a magazine. Miguel's eyes were wide with panic as Tom's cheerful knock echoed through the house again. "Sarah, it's Tom. I brought those tomatoes." "Promised you," she forced her voice to sound normal. "Just a second," she hissed to Miguel. "Act natural. Don't let him know we found anything," opening the door with a smile that felt like broken glass. Sarah greeted the man she now knew had been deceiving them for years. Tom Bradley stood there with his characteristic grin, holding a basket of garden tomatoes, looking like every neighbor's dream, until she noticed his eyes flicking past her into the house. "Hey Tom, come on in. Miguel's here too. We were just having coffee." Tom's smile faltered for just a microsecond when he spotted Miguel at the dining table, but he recovered quickly. Too quickly, Sarah's suspicions crystallized into certainty. "Morning," Tom said, his voice carrying a strange tension. "Beautiful day, isn't it? I was just telling my wife how lucky we are to live in such a well-managed community." Miguel's jaw tightened, but he managed a nod. "Yeah, well-managed. That's one way to put it." Tom's eyes narrowed slightly. "Everything okay? You sound stressed," Sarah jumped in before Miguel could respond. "Oh, you know how it is. The HOA sent us another one of their notices. Nothing major." "Ah, yes, Patricia can be thorough," Tom chuckled, but his eyes remained cold. "What was the notice about?" Sarah's pulse spiked. "This was a test, just the usual something about landscaping compliance. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." Tom nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on the dining table where papers were still scattered beneath the magazine. "Well, if you need any help navigating the HOA bureaucracy, you know I'm always here to help. I've been dealing with their ... quirks for a long time." "How long exactly?" Miguel asked suddenly, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Tom's smile froze. "What do you mean?" "I mean, when did you first get involved with the HOA? You mentioned you joined the board recently, but I was curious about your history in the community." Sarah could practically see the gears turning in Tom's head. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. "Well, I've been in the neighborhood for about 5 years, but I only got actively involved with the board last year when Patricia asked me to help with some of the more complex issues." Sarah's blood boiled. She'd seen his signature on the 2018 Constitution. He was lying to their faces. "Complex issues?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain conversational. "Oh, you know, updating outdated procedures, modernizing some of the rules. The original Constitution was pretty bare bones. We've had to flesh it out over the years to address situations the founders never anticipated." Miguel's coffee mug hit the table with a sharp clink. Funny thing about that, Tom, I was just looking at my HOA documents yesterday, and I noticed some ... inconsistencies. Tom's entire demeanor shifted. The friendly neighbor mask slipped, revealing something predatory underneath. Inconsistencies? His voice was dangerously quiet. Yeah, Miguel continued, oblivious to the warning signs Sarah was frantically trying to signal. Like sections that don't match what I remember from my closing, or rules that seem to have appeared out of nowhere. Tom took a step closer to the dining table. Miguel, I hope you're not suggesting that there's something improper about the HOA's governance. That would be a very serious accusation. The threat was barely veiled. Sarah's mind raced, trying to find a way to diffuse the situation before Miguel said something that would put them both in danger. Of course not, she laughed, the sound brittle and false. Miguel's just confused about some of the technical language. You know how these legal documents can be? But Tom wasn't buying it. His eyes were fixed on the magazine covering their research, and Sarah realized with growing horror that a corner of the authentic Constitution was visible beneath it. Mind if I sit down? Tom asked, but he was already moving toward the table. These old legs aren't what they used to be. Actually, we were just finishing up, Sarah said quickly, but Tom was already pulling out a chair, the one directly across from the magazine. He sat down and casually reached for the papers underneath. What are we reading today? Sarah's vision tunneled. Time seemed to slow as Tom's hand moved toward the evidence that would expose everything. She watched in horror as he lifted the magazine and saw his own signature staring back at him from the 2018 Constitution. The change in Tom was instantaneous and terrifying. His face went completely blank, his eyes turning to ice. When he looked up, Sarah saw a man capable of anything. Well, he said quietly, his voice devoid of all warmth, this is unfortunate. Miguel finally sensed the danger, his body tensing, as he realized they were no longer talking to a friendly neighbor, but to a cornered predator. Tom, let's just, Sarah began, but he cut her off with a raised hand. Sarah, Miguel, you've stumbled onto something that's going to cause a lot of problems for a lot of people. Important people who don't like problems. We haven't done anything wrong, Miguel said, his voice shaking slightly. If the HOA documents are fraudulent, if Tom laughed, but there was no humor in it, Miguel, you're holding evidence of a conspiracy that goes back 7 years and involves some very powerful individuals. Do you really think Patricia Henley came up with this scheme on her own? Sarah's blood turned to ice water. What are you saying? I'm saying that Willowbrook Heights was designed from the ground up to be a cash cow. The fake Constitution, the inflated fines, the phantom rules, it's all part of a system that's generated over $2 million in illegal fees over the past 5 years. Miguel's face went white. 2 million. And that's just from this community. There are 12 other HOAs in the county running the same playbook. Tom leaned back in his chair, his demeanor now openly menacing. You think you're the first homeowners? To get suspicious, we've dealt with curious neighbors before. Sarah's hands began to shake. What happened to them? Tom's smile was razor sharp. Let's just say they found it in their best interest to relocate. Amazing how quickly people can lose their jobs, have their credit destroyed, face legal troubles that force them to sell their homes at a loss. The room fell deadly silent. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. What do you want? She whispered. I want you to forget everything you think you've discovered. I want these documents destroyed, and I want you both to pay your fines without another word of complaint. And if we don't, Miguel asked, though his voice was barely audible. Tom pulled out his phone and opened what looked like a text message. Then I make a call, and by tomorrow morning, Sarah, your husband's company will receive an anonymous tip about some very creative expense reports he's been filing. And Miguel, that small business loan you got last year, the one where you might have been a little optimistic about your income projections, well, the IRS might find that very interesting. Sarah felt the world tilting around her. They had files on everyone. They'd been preparing for this moment, but then something inside her snapped. Maybe it was the casual way Tom had threatened her family, or the realization that they'd been living under a criminal organization's thumb for years. The fear transformed into pure crystalline rage. No, she said quietly. Tom's eyebrows raised. Excuse me? I said no? Sarah stood up, her voice growing stronger. "You made one mistake, Tom. You assumed we were the only ones who'd figured this out." Tom's confident expression flickered. "What are you talking about?" Sarah pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. A video call was in progress, and on the other end was a woman in a business suit sitting in what looked like an office. "Meet Detective Amanda Chen, Financial Crimes Division. She's been listening to every word." Of this conversation, Tom's face went ashen as the detective spoke through the phone speaker. "Thomas Bradley, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, and racketeering. Sarah, Miguel, please step away from Mr. Bradley. Units are already surrounding the house." Through the window, Sarah could see police cars silently pulling up, their occupants moving with practiced efficiency. Tom looked around desperately. The friendly neighbor facade completely shattered. But as the police entered the house, Tom's panic transformed into something even more chilling, a cold, calculating smile that made Sarah's blood freeze. "You have no idea what you've just done," he whispered as the handcuffs clicked into place. "This goes so much higher than you can imagine. And when they find out you've exposed them," he looked directly at Sarah, his eyes promising retribution, "they're going to come for everyone you love." The police station's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Sarah and Miguel sat in Detective Chen's cramped office, the weight of Tom's final threat hanging heavy between them. Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, spread a map across her desk, marked with red pins. 12 HOA communities, she said grimly, all running the same scam. "We've been investigating this for 8 months, but we needed someone on the inside to make the connection." Sarah stared at the map, her stomach churning. 8 months. How many people knew about this? More than you'd want to believe. Chen pulled up a file on her computer. The scheme was sophisticated fake documents, bribed county clerks, even a network of lawyers who helped draft the fraudulent constitutions. "We're talking about a criminal enterprise with tentacles reaching into local government." Miguel leaned forward, his voice hoarse. "Tom said we weren't the first to figure it out. What happened to the others?" Chen's expression darkened. "The Johnsons from Pine Ridge Estates lost their home last year after a series of mysterious financial disasters. The Garcias from Sunset Manor had to relocate after someone anonymously reported them to immigration, even though they're citizens. Every single person who got too close to the truth faced systematic destruction of their lives." Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from David. "Something's wrong at work. They're saying there's an issue with my expense reports. Can you come home?" Her hands started shaking. "It's starting," Tom said. They'd go after David's job. Chen stood up quickly. "We anticipated this. Sarah, I need you to understand something. The people behind this conspiracy aren't going to just disappear because we arrested Tom Bradley. He was middle management at best." She pulled out another file, this one marked classified. 3 hours ago, we intercepted communications between Tom and his handlers. They're activating what they call Protocol 7, systematic retaliation against anyone who threatens their operation. Miguel's face went white. "What does that mean?" "It means they're coming after your jobs, your credit, your families, your freedom, everything. They've done it before, and they're very good at it." Sarah felt a cold dread settling in her chest. "So what do? Run? Hide? No," Chen said firmly. "We fight back. But I need you to trust me completely, because what I'm about to propose is going to sound insane." She opened her laptop and turned it toward them. On the screen was a live feed of what looked like a conference room filled with people in expensive suits. That's the emergency board meeting happening right now at Meridian Properties, the parent company behind all 12 HOA scams. They're deciding how to handle the Tom Bradley situation. Sarah squinted at the screen. "How are you? We've had surveillance on Meridian for months. The problem is, everyone we've identified is insulated by layers of lawyers and shell companies. We need evidence of direct criminal activity, and we need it tonight." Chen pulled up building schematics on another screen. Meridian's servers contain everything: the real financial records, communications about the fake constitutions, evidence of the bribery and intimidation campaigns. But it's all encrypted and protected by a security system that would take us months to crack legally. Miguel was starting to understand, unless someone with legitimate access walked it right out the front door. Exactly. And it turns out Sarah, that your husband David's company has been doing IT consulting for Meridian Properties for the past 2 years. Sarah's world tilted what David never mentioned because he didn't know. His company was subcontracted through 3 different intermediaries. David's been maintaining their backup systems without realizing he was helping criminals cover their tracks. The irony hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her husband had been unknowingly helping the very people who were now trying to destroy their lives. Chen leaned across the desk. David has administrative access to their entire network. If he goes in tonight for an emergency system check, he can copy everything we need to take down the whole operation. Are you insane? Sarah stood up, her voice rising. You want me to ask my husband to break into a criminal organization's headquarters? Sarah, sit down. Chen's voice was steel. Because I'm about to tell you something that's going to change everything you think you know about this situation. Sarah slowly sank back into her chair, her heart pounding. We ran background checks on everyone in your neighborhood yesterday. Do you want to know what we found about David? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Sarah couldn't breathe. David Martinez, your husband of 6 years, doesn't exist in any database prior to 2019. No college records, no employment history, no social security activity. The man you married appeared out of thin air the same year the HOA scam started. The room spun around. Sarah, that's impossible. I've seen his college transcripts, his all forgeries, professional ones. Chen's voice was gentle but relentless. Sarah, I'm sorry, but David isn't who you think he is, and I don't think his involvement with Meridian Properties is coincidental. Miguel reached out to steady Sarah as she swayed in her chair. You're saying David's part of the conspiracy. I'm saying David's been monitoring Sarah from the inside, making sure she never got too close to the truth. The problem is, he clearly didn't expect her to be this tenacious. Sarah's mind reeled, memories flashing through her consciousness. David's reluctance to dig deeper into the HOA issues, his convenient work trips whenever she wanted to research their legal options. The way he always steered conversations away from taking action against the board. The night you discovered the fake constitution, Chen continued, David sent a text message to Tom Bradley. One word, compromised. Sarah's phone buzzed again. Another text from David. Where are you? We need to talk. Come home now. Chen looked at the message. Sarah, I need to ask you a question, and your life might depend on your answer. Do you want to know the truth about your husband, or do you want to go home and pretend none of this happened? Sarah stared at the text message, her entire world crumbling around her. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of lies. The man who'd held her when she cried, who'd promised to protect her, who'd made love to her just 2 nights ago, he'd been working for the people trying to destroy her. What's the truth? She whispered. Chen pulled up one final file. David Martinez is actually Daniel Cortez, a former corporate security specialist who's been placed in communities across the state to monitor potential threats to Meridian's operations. You're his 3rd assignment, Sarah. The other 2 wives never figured out what was happening. What happened to them? One moved away after a nervous breakdown. The other, ... double quotes. Chen paused. The other died in what was ruled a car accident. The silence in the room was deafening. Sarah felt something inside her break. Not just her heart, but her entire sense of reality. But then, like a phoenix rising from ashes, something else emerged. Pure, incandescent rage. What do you need me to do? She asked, her voice deadly calm. Chen smiled grimly. We're going to send you home to your husband. You're going to act like nothing's changed. And when he least expects it, you're going to help us tear down everything he's worked to build. Sarah stood up, her entire body thrumming with purpose. And after we destroy their operation, Sarah, you're going to get the one thing they never expected you to want. What's that? Chen's smile was razor-sharp revenge. Outside the police station, Sarah looked up at the stars scattered across the dark sky. Tomorrow, she would go home to the man who'd been lying to her for 6 years. She would smile and pretend to be the naive victim they thought she was. But David Cortez, or whatever his real name was, had made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated what a woman could do when she had nothing left to lose. As Sarah drove home to begin the most dangerous performance of her life, she couldn't help but smile. They'd spent years systematically destroying people's lives, thinking they were untouchable. Tomorrow, they were going to learn just how wrong they'd been.